It's early December.
I know.
Right.
I know.
People think
You don't
Houston
really have to
Beaches or
fight.
some insane thing like that.
Crazy.
And
But like the
the-
last couple. I was like, that wouldn't do anything
You
for
know what
me.
I mean? Like,
Exactly. It's cold.
yeah, it's just
I'm meant to leave.
it's not good
To be a
for you.
cheerleader.
Once every couple of years.
All right, well, this is fabulous. Welcome, everyone. The time is 6:30, and I would like to call this District 204 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Marilyn, can you please call the roll?
Member Morris.
Present.
Member Rita Daniels.
Present.
Member Dillon.
Here.
Member Giannotti Fry.
Here.
Member Gretsch.
Here.
Member Strewing.
Present.
Member Thomas.
Here.
All right, thank you so much. And now, if everyone can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. The first item tonight is public participation, and Marilyn, we don't have anybody. All right, well then we're just going to jump right in. So then the first agenda item is our continued future facilities funding discussion about the Willow Springs property. So over the past few months, we've met with the Village of Willow Springs, the Pleasantdale Park District, and D107 Pleasantdale School District for their input on potential development of the Willow Springs property. Just as a very brief recap, there seems to be consensus among those three for development within zoning, but special consideration for land swap with the Park District and additional acreage allocated for growth within the school district. And the village also shared that they expect and have expertise in holding public forums for community feedback. So the goal tonight is really just to determine if the board wants to continue this exploration process. And if so, our legal counsel, James Levy, is here and can suggest some tangible next steps based on his experience, and also is here to answer any questions that we have. So I guess I'll maybe start with just kind of like a nod if, or not, if people are interested in considering this, or continuing this exploration. I mean, I would like to continue, so I'll just put mine out
I can start off
there.
on this side if you want.
Sure.
I think that it would be good to continue it and see what next steps would be logical in terms of, having a town hall or something of that effect with the Village of Willow Springs for the residents to be able to be heard. But yeah, I think that it would be good to continue moving forward with discussions.
Okay.
I just want clarification, sir. Like, you want to go ahead first?
Sure.
It was so silent for a moment.
I just don't. I don't know what like exploration looks like. I mean,
So maybe then that's.
it's hard to say let's continue, but we don't know what.
Know what
we're
you're
gonna be
saying yes to.
continuing.
Fair enough.
So I mean, that's
what I was
I
gonna
would
say.
just like to know that
Sure.
before I can say.
So that's perfect then, James, if you want to.
Sure.
Jump
So,
in.
As the president had stated, we've met with various interested governmental bodies and heard their positions and their issues related to the property, so we have an understanding of what their interest in the property or things that they may be looking for to help ameliorate certain issues they may have as a result of development of that property. Obviously, now what I've seen traditionally is you take that information, you go back internally now, and you look at it in relation to how you want to proceed with the property. So we've heard from those various entities, and some of, land swap, for example, is one, or possible swap/sale of land. So we would go back internally and start to look at that. What would that look like? How can we accomplish some of these things? Does it work with our vision? Does it not work with our vision? What is it? And so at that juncture, usually you go to an administrative team to start to consider that and start to have that feedback, the analysis, and bring that back to the board for discussion. If there's separate tracks about public forums or things like that nature, that's fine. Usually that's more of a board level discussion rather than a committee. Right now, based on what we've talked with the other parties, is to take that information, we analyze it and see, is there a way where there can be a win-win? Or how does our vision for this property work in light with the other folks and what they would hope to see from this?
So then, James, that sounds like more, rolling up sleeves, like kind of digging into it and maybe coming back to the, when you say that, like, do you mean then that that group would then come back to the board and say, okay, we looked at, 5 different scenarios, and within each of these, if this, then that, and if that, then this,
Correct.
and then that becomes a targeted conversation instead of,
Right. So, for example, again, these are all hypotheticals. We've had discussions, and I know previously there were discussions with the Park District, and they own some land in there. Does it make sense right now for you to sell it as is with where their land is located? They've offered to perhaps do a land swap. That could be mutually beneficial. So we need to look, what would be a good land swap that would be mutually beneficial, and see that. And then go through that type of analysis, and then, like you said, these are some arrangements, and then report back to the board. Obviously, the committee doesn't have any authority to do independent negotiations, But there have been these other suggestions and discussions, and I think now you have to kind of look at that internally and how does that work? Because you're now starting to get down into more specifics and to see how the sale of the property in light of what data you've gathered, and you've gone to these other entities to talk and get their input, how does that work in relation to your vision, your future of the property? So that's exactly what I would envision
Okay.
going forward.
So do boards usually, how many boards usually like get involved in land swaps? Versus just selling the property and then letting the seller or the buyer determine to swap?
Well, it's unique to this situation. So I've had some land swaps where they just want to clean it out up first because that makes the sale, let's just say it's a square or a rectangle, whatever it may be, makes it cleaner and easier for your developers to look at and not have to worry about it. Other folks in different scenarios don't want to get tangled up in that, and they say, look, we're going to put up for sale, and it's going to be all up to the developer to figure it out. So it's really fact-specific on each particular situation. Here again, I think because of the way the land's out, it at least makes sense to go through and see what way you could possibly make this a solid rectangle for a developer to look at without having to work with or around other pieces of property. But again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on what avenue you're trying to put out there for developers to make it easier or keep your hands, off of it and whatnot.
So that's the perfect example, though, of okay, if you go down this path, this is what it means, like A, B, and C. But if you wanted to do, go this route, then it means X, Y, Z, right? And then that gives us something tangible to react to.
Right, and so,
Is that-
the general consensus is you want to try and put property up for sale that's easy to develop. So if there's co-ownership or there's something else that might make that a little difficult, usually you try to remove that if you can. If you can't, then you leave it up to someone else. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's what you would explore and say, is this something we can do that might make this more attractive if we move some of these parcels around that we could get a higher value for? Developers will generally, any excuse they can say to give a lower price, they will. So if they say, well, the burden now is on us to work with the park district after we buy this to try and do something with them. And they may say it's because of that we put in a lower bid. Maybe not, maybe, but usually, again, developers want the least path of resistance to get their project completed. So, to me, it's at least worthwhile to look and see and to vet this. We took the time to go out and meet with everyone and see what we can do and how it looks, and then present back to the board what those are. And there may be ideas that weren't even thought about once it comes to the board. But that's generally what you're trying to do. Make it as simple as you can for a developer to go forward. You're a little unique here because you have a lot of moving parts and neighbors with significant interest because where the property is located. So obviously that's why we met with folks. But that's usually the way you proceed. Internally now you're going to digest it and see how this would work best with you in light of all the information you've gathered.
What is this committee, or I shouldn't say committee, I don't even know what we call it as part of this process. Who's involved in this vetting? And then, as you keep mentioning, bringing back presentations to the board.
Yeah, usually it's an administrative committee that's put together by the administration. That way it's easier to get up and running and work with and assemble and whatnot. That's usually who it is. There can be anybody that can be on it. Just depends on what folks want to do and how that works. But it's an administrative committee, so that it's easier to work and get things done than an appointed official committee of the board.
I think I've heard similar with other districts too, that usually have much smaller parcels of land.
I like the idea of this because I think if we were to try and navigate this in a board meeting, we would probably be here for 8 hours or more, which I don't have necessarily a huge issue with, but I like the idea of a small group kind of vetting out doing the heavy lifting and then presenting it to us to kind of navigate more succinctly. The only thing I would maybe add to it would be Because I am interested in selling this property. I think our kids, our school district needs it, but I also think it would be helpful if we had some level of board representation on that as well. Obviously, not in violation of OMA and keeping it to less than 3, just for continuity of conversations. But I do like the idea of the committee, or the administrative team.
And that's perfectly fine.
To have a mix on the
To have
committee?
a mix, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
it's no problem if you wanted to have a board member on there as well as superintendent and whomever else was appropriate. But as he said, the biggest issue is that it's easier to go through all those machinations and whatnot in a smaller committee than at the board level. But again, you're not relinquishing any control. They don't have the ability to do anything and make deals or anything like that. So it all does come back to you via, again, I'm just picking the superintendent, for example, that reporting back.
Well, and it sounds like an immediate next step is not even, like, when you were talking about negotiation, it's not even going back out and meeting with anybody else. It's really rolling up sleeves with the information gathered and kind of putting some
Correct.
thoughts together, right?
Correct, Yeah, exactly,
Just
because
to
we don't know,
digest it.
for example, I know you've had discussions with the Park District on the previous sale, but if you're gonna do a land swap, what is the best, how does that look like for you? What is your top interest? Or we go back to anybody and say, we wanna do a land swap, if we're gonna do it, where would we like that swap to occur? Or if we've had discussions, if we're gonna sell land to Pleasantdale, what does that look like? What area are we willing to work with? And how does that work? So before you can even go back, I think we need to look at and see what makes us comfortable. How does this work in relation to the entire parcel? And then after that, you can start to have negotiations as they're deemed necessary. Or discussions, I don't know, however it works out with the other parties, but yes.
I guess my question is, well, one, if we're gonna do a land swap before we were to list the property, what would be the time frame on that?
Well, again, these are all things that we have to go back and start to look at.
But it would be, probably a few months for that. to
Well, it
have that.
depends, you could do it on how you want that land swap to occur. The land swap can be, if you want to do the land swap regardless of the sale, that's one thing. If you only want to do the land swap contingent on a sale, that's a different thing, so we would have to hash that out. But it would usually occur, again, if it's going to happen as part of the sale or prior to the sale, you would make a contingent on the sale. It might occur at closing, when the closing's done. If, for example, the board decides, you know what, a land swap makes sense regardless of when we sell this property, that may be done sooner rather than later. So it can take any different time period in that timeline to sell the property. Does that?
That makes sense,
help?
perfect, thank you.
Well, and that's why I like having those, because those are almost like 3 different options that
Right.
then we would be able to react to.
I can tell you right now, I'd like it contingent upon the sale, because that, we don't know what our, potential bidder may want. So I would hate, goes back to what we had discussed previously, where, we want, where do we want that? I don't want to proactively swap it and then say, gosh, we made a mistake, we can't go back and change that. So for me, I'm looking at it contingent upon the sale. But the other question I'm asking that I'm really struggling with here is, what more information do we need? I think that as a board, we need to talk about, because we've heard from so many residents, you've met with everybody. What else would we want? What more information do we feel we don't have to make a decision to move forward? That's what I don't understand.
So what I feel like this is an intermediate step, yes, we talked to everybody else, but even just those examples that you threw out there, I think we need to know, if we swap and it's contingent, then we have to think about these 3 things. We haven't put, anybody hasn't put pen to paper on what that means. So in order to move forward, it's almost like giving options of paths that then we would be able to explore. So I think
Why
an
would a
immediate
community group be better for that than the board doing that and us asking questions and discussing it at the
I think
table?
what he recommended was an administrative board.
Well, right, but still though, why would it be?
It's unwieldy. Again, it can happen. It's not, my experience, those don't happen at the board because it's difficult to have those discussions, one, in open. There may be things that you want to talk candidly about that may not be best discussed in open. Two, it's difficult to have that type of discussion with 7 board members and trying to come to a resolution on every single item as opposed to presentation. That's usually what you, but again, it's not.
So if we did an administrative board, like review of that, I mean, I was hearing though that we would have some of the community involved in that too, or no?
No.
Oh, okay, that's what I was thinking, okay, because I was like, what
There's
more?
community open houses I heard, but not on the.
I think Paula mentioned meeting with the community, but that's like,
That's different.
that's a different.
That's a completely
That's a
different
different
recommendation.
path. I think, I took all of this as just for pure efficiency standpoint, which I appreciate, like, that it's taking, I mean, we've shared summaries of our meetings, and I think everybody's been, digesting it, but then this would kind of put it all together in maybe a meaningful way to have something to react to. So then we would say, okay, we do want to do a forum, or we do want to make this contingent, or we do, I mean, I'm just making it up. I mean, I don't know what will come out of all of that, but kind of like a smaller group to roll up their sleeves
So who would
and
you envision
provide
in
some
the smaller
thoughts.
group then? Just, you would have 2 board members, right?
It'd be whatever you want. Administrative committees they're usually made up by the administration, and you keep them relatively small, not huge, for the same purpose of trying to keep a group that can get together. It depends on what you want. The more the board becomes involved in appointing a committee, the more the committee becomes a committee of the board, which then is subject to open meetings, which then kind of frustrates the purpose of that meeting, because then you can do it yourselves essentially. So,
The one thing that I heard in this, and please clarify if this is that it would, like, really efficiency, like everything's still on the table for everybody to talk about and like ask questions and dig in, like nothing's lost that couldn't be discussed with the board. It's just kind of putting it in some semblance of order so that we have something tangible to react to. That's how I was taking
it's
the
like, the
recommendation.
various properties, again, just assuming there's swaps or sales, that's a perfect example. Like, how do those work? How are you going to get that accomplished in conjunction with the ultimate sale of property? So we would have to sit down and kind of think that through. Are we going to have, is it contingent on the sale of the property? Is there an alternate perhaps in the bid if it doesn't get sold? So those are all the things now we need to sit down and kind of think, what does it look like? How do we put this through if there are going to be options? And how do we put this in a way that folks can bid on it in a sensible manner and get you the top dollar? So that it's sifting through all of the moving parts, if you will.
And I'm hearing that sifting through ahead of time could ultimately save time and make it more efficient so that when it is posted or listed or whatever the proper terminology would be, there's options for potential buyers so that we know who we can entertain and who we can't based upon
Yes,
no,
but even before.
potential decisions, they're not, I shouldn't even say decisions, right? Just by discussions, like we came up with, option A, option B, option C, we've got these different possibilities here. And now it's easier for us when potential bids were to come in to say, well, this wouldn't work for them.
Yeah, and even
Right.
before we even get down that road, it'd be to show to you, this is what we think is out there, and these are your options, and so you can see it and say, you know what, I don't want to do A. I'm not interested in that arrangement at all. Okay, A's off the table, and then we can start to refine that down. It may take a couple times going back with the committee and meeting with the board, but exactly. And then, once you've refined that and we're at a spot where the board is comfortable, and it's, again, presuming we're going forward, then that helps us finalize and start then to work on the terms and conditions.
I don't mean to be very slow about it, but I'm still not.
No, that's fine.
You can kill, I'm still not really, like, who would be on this committee? I mean, I know that we can appoint who we want, but who would you suggest to be on this committee? Because I also don't want it to be not transparent.
I'll jump in here because I feel like the best comparable, and especially for those who were on the board at the time, about a year and a half ago, the board explored the idea of a land use consultant
And that was a separate committee, myself, Brian, and I think we had one other board member that met with the companies, gathered all the information, did all the legwork, and then brought it back to the board for discussion.
That's a good
And then
example.
that's the best comparable I can kind of.
Yeah, because I'm just hearing like community, like I just,
Yeah.
so it's like 3 or 4 people, so we don't, because I then worried if we have 2 board members on it, it becomes like a committee of the whole type of situation, and then is that really even more efficient?
For sure, yeah.
I mean, I think it would be really helpful for all of us to have, here's A, B, C, and D, and then let's talk about the pros and the cons of each one. I think would be really helpful. I just feel like we've been spinning our wheels for years now, and I feel like we've heard so much from the community, and we're really trying hard to listen to that, by what we're doing, but I also feel like we all feel, and we need it financially to be able to sell this, so what's the most efficient way to get there? But, so, I think a smaller committee like that, to me, could be a very,
Streamlines the process.
right, but as long as we can bring it back to the board in a public
Yes.
forum.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
the committee does not
Absolutely.
have independent authority to do anything other than just do that analysis and bring it back.
Okay, thank you for, like, the 3rd time was a charm, so thank you.
No problem.
Nailed it.
It's all good. And given that we've heard different feedback, over the course of a couple of years, would we be vetting or considering other options too than even what we just heard? Like, would there be opportunities, like, and again, I'm not, hypothetical, very hypothetical, but, having heard at one point about, looking and seeing if there was any interest from, forest preserves. And I know we looked into that before in the past, but I don't know if and that may not, maybe they'll be part of that vetting process, but could we make sure we're, paying attention to those types of things and those options too?
I feel like that would all be part of that conversation, right?
Yeah, and I get- yeah, I guess
Kind of
that's
see
like-
how it all,
not just-
digest the information we have
Right.
right now into.
And see what we
then-
haven't maybe identified as another option.
And also make sure
It
that.
may not make sense, but,
Yeah. Also make sure that,
Right.
it provides us moving in a forward direction, because you don't want to spin around.
no wasting, I don't want
I
to
mean,
be
it's been
wasting
years.
time with
Yeah.
something that,
I hear you, but I think we're getting into like another area. Like if we're looking at that, like kind of option, like we're
As something
straying from
different?
land swap discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what,
You're talking about possibly doing something with the forest
it
preserve?
was like the forest preserve, just some, there.
but yeah, I'm just like saying, like, I think that we're adding more to the scope than what you originally just had suggested.
I feel like all of this digest of all this is all meant to take us into a direction, if we want, again, taking this one step at a time, to terms and conditions. And then terms and conditions that would then be,
Right,
anybody could.
okay.
And to answer Mike's question, yeah, I think that path of forest preserve wasn't before us. It doesn't mean that we couldn't make a quick call.
Again, I said hypothetical.
Exactly,
I
I
want to be
understand.
clear that I'm not putting it on the
No,
table.
I'm just
as,
saying, like, we can do it,
right.
I'm just saying, it just adds, it seems like that's adding in another layer, and
Area.
I just want everybody to understand,
Yeah.
that we know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, understood. Okay.
Right. So I see heads nodding that a digest and then bringing it back to the board is a good path forward. So thank you.
But then the scope of what,
Yeah, I think that's the big question.
Right, what
the
is the
scope.
charge done?
because if
Yeah,
it's
what's
just,
the
we're just
goal?
discussing a land swap situation, or are we discussing who we would sell this to? Because my understanding is when we put it out there, we market it to everybody, and it's just, it would make if a forest preserve wanted to vote to,
Sure, right.
put a bid in, they could put a bid in. It's
Right.
not
Of
that we're
course.
asking them to put a bid in.
Right,
Is-
right.
So like, what is the scope of what the committee would do?
So if I can jump in for 2 seconds.
That'd be great.
The way I would envision is like, again, we've got the input from the various governmental bodies. Take that and look at it and see how that works with our vision. We understand there's some folks who have, situations that are difficult with the development. Is there something we can do? We've heard them. Let's look and see what is there and do an analysis and what the options are to try and sell the property and then bring that back to you guys and how that might look. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I think ultimately, what we're looking to do is sell the property within the zoning, right? And if, again, hypothetically, forest preserve or whatever it is within that zoning, then they bid and we put terms and conditions of it forward. I think the biggest thing that we need to decide and get some investigation answers on is what would be those options for land swaps or private sales to 107 if we go there, or donation, you know, all of those different options that we've been talking about. I feel like that small group can vet out and then bring back.
Okay, you just added donation.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I mean, that was
Like,
discussed
we,
before.
land
I
swap
know,
and
I know.
donation are two different things, so let's like
I mean,
stick
we need to go
land
back to the
swap.
scope. I mean, I would think.
To me, the that's a board discussion, the swap, whether it's a swap or a donation or a sale. But what I think we've got to get into is, how does that, if we're gonna do something, is there something that we can live with that addresses these things? And then we can come back and say, here's our square, we're willing to move this to here, and perhaps sell, swap, whatever it is, this particular area. And then that is a presentation to you guys, and then at that juncture, you can say, I don't want to swap, I want to sell, or this doesn't, and we'll start to have that discussion in more detail, because now you'll see how this kind of works, as opposed to in just theory. And, you know, and again, as we look at it and try and address some of these things, we may say, we really, really want to do X, but we couldn't do it. It made an odd shape, which is not attractive to developers, and that would harm the overall sale. So the decision as to whether something's sold, donated, swapped, is ultimately going to be yours. I think what the committee would do is just start to dive into that and see, is there a way that it might work in some fashion, and then present that back to you so that you can decide which one of those, how that all works out, if that's something that you as a group, as a majority, are willing to do.
Could I ask also, as part of the scope for that committee, to ask if the group could put together just a recap of all the conversations that have been had, just highlights, not in depth, but highlights of what was discussed and what the options that were discussed. You bring those to fruition so that that's part of that conversation in addition
Yeah,
to-
absolutely, yeah, because
Okay.
because we're going to be doing, exactly, yes, to answer your simple question, yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What does a timing like this look like? Would we get going on this now?
I mean, I would think so. With the holidays, it might not make it to, I mean, I guess it depends on schedules. It might not make it to the January meeting, but probably
Okay.
February for sure.
Okay.
It depends on how, yeah, I think it depends on
Yeah, and I
schedules
just want to
and
make
how
sure
long
we're
it
having as
takes.
much, allowing the right amount of time that needs to be done to do
Sure.
it, so that we're getting some pretty, like, concrete scenarios.
Scenarios.
The scope is just
yeah.
gonna be on the scope to start with is just on the land swap, right?
But I think that was just one thing that came up in those conversations. So the idea is to say, we got all this input and, our goal is to sell the land. So what are 6 different scenarios trying for a win-win, but it might not work out? Like, can we move things around? And when we did
So it
this,
would
we found
include-
that would happen.
Because I think this is where, like, I'm hearing two different things. So it would include the discussion then of, like, did we want to donate it? Because that's what someone was asking for. Did we want to do a land swap? I mean, so I just think I need to really have a clear understanding of what is the scope of the discussion. Because now, like what you said, it would be all different scenarios, taking
So
in all the information.
The only two asks really, if I think back to those meetings, aside from, again, within zoning, which I feel like is a given for this conversation, was, the park district didn't ask for a land swap, but said they were open to it as needed, right? And then the school district said, we're already at capacity, we'd like room to grow. They did not specifically say only donation, and I felt like we tried to make that clear in the last meeting. It was, would you sell it to us? Would you donate? Would it be a combination? Like, they're asking, we need more space. So I think this committee then would say, okay, those are 2 big pieces. Let's look at a map. Let's see what that looks like, and then bring it back to the board and say, okay, this would be a path if we did, you know, this combination or this other combination. I mean, I don't know what it would be because we haven't done that. That work hasn't been done yet.
Right, and there's no decisions being made. It's
No
strictly
decisions are being made.
exploring
It's just to
options.
give you.
I mean, I
don't-
appreciate
yeah,
that, but I just,
yeah.
if we're gonna keep moving forward, I wanna have the scope be very clear, so that does keep us on a path moving forward, rather than having it be just kind of like, hey, we're gonna talk about different options. I would like it very well outlined as to what exactly is the committee gonna do and the purpose of the committee. So, I mean, my suggestion would be, maybe we talk about today who would be on the committee, and then have that committee at the next meeting come back and say, here is the scope, and to say, make sure that we're all comfortable with it, because I don't know, it's so loose right now, that I don't know what it's gonna be, like, I can vote for a committee right now to say, I mean, it seems like a good idea, but I feel like I need more definition on that.
So do scope first, right?
Right,
Yeah,
that's what I would feel more
so
comfortable with.
again, if it's gonna be an administrative committee, you don't vote on it. Then if you vote on it, then it's a board committee.
Well, right, no, but have an agreement amongst the board if we're gonna have an administrative committee, because I don't know that I could, who makes the decision if we're gonna have an administrative committee?
Well, you can make that decision, but if you start appointing people who are on the committee, then it's no longer an administrative committee.
Okay, so like,
That's the
okay,
difference.
so even if we, as a board, then would decide if we're gonna have an administrative committee, correct or no?
Yes, you can do that, or yes, that's one way to do it.
I just feel like I
Scope
need,
is most important.
Yeah,
I
the
think
scope
that's-
is essentially going back and all the information that we gathered from the various governmental bodies, taking that and then because if we didn't do that, right, if we didn't do that, then I would just draft up terms and conditions and present them to you. That's how it would work.
right. So I
Right.
guess I need to have like a clear understanding
So
of like the
so
written
the
scope.
purpose of the committee would be, take all the information that we got from meeting with the three parties, look at that in conjunction with what we want to do to sell the property, and can we accommodate some of those things? And what are we willing to do with it, and then present that back to you.
Okay.
Which would ultimately lead to next steps of
Then
terms
would be
and
the discussion on it. Do
conditions
you
or
want to
more
swap, not want to
conversation.
swap? Right, you'd see that laid out in one of the other things was an access road, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But there were some other small
There
things.
were other things, for
Right.
sure.
So I just didn't want people to think there was only two.
Yeah.
And that's why I just want, like,
Yeah,
that's where I feel more
It
comfortable,
doesn't
like.
feel like there's a definitive, number of scenarios at this point, just yet, too. Like, I don't think it's just two, but I think it would like
Correct.
taking those things into consideration.
So like, looking, if you're taking all the information we've gotten in, and then you would look at, like, the administrative committee would make a recommendation of various options and present them back to the board to see what we were comfortable with.
Correct.
And that would include but not be limited to a land swap, a donation, selling to the park district, that kind of thing.
Correct.
Okay.
Which is different from what we started out with.
Correct. Because I thought we were just talking about the land swap.
Right.
I think that was an example used early on that we kind of maybe shouldn't have continued using as an example throughout all of this, but
Yeah, it doesn't make, in my opinion, it doesn't make sense for you to go one by one. Do we do the land
Yeah.
swap? Do we do the exchange? Do we do, and just, we've got the data that we've collected from them, and then we see how that works as far as our ability to accommodate our neighbors, while at the same time still maximizing our ability to get the top dollar for the site.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of this, of really narrowing the scope, that last piece is, my recommendation of the board is you consider that, it's options for a land swap that benefits District 204 or that doesn't harm District 204. Like that probably
but
should
it's
be. the
not
specific-
just the land swap, like it's.
And the sale donation. So those are the two scopes that I wrote down was.
But we also, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but we
no,
also.
I need to
in
know,
the-
so please, yeah, please
In
make
the
sure that I know.
meetings, and so we'll resurface the summaries, I think that's great, because I think just having been in the meetings, it's very top of mind for me and probably you, Tim, but like, there were lots of scenarios that people threw out there in the, just in that fact-finding stage of like, we want to work with you, but we have to think about access roads and traffic patterns, and is there flooding over here, and things like that, right? So taking all of that information and saying, okay, what could make sense, in across 5 different options. In these 3, we were able to accomplish A, B, and C, but not D and E, right? But over here, we could do A and B really, really well and maybe touch on like D. Like, I think
Yeah.
somebody has to be able to go through all of that, because otherwise we're just, we need to, we're just gonna keep like spinning on it.
I do like, though,
100%.
Brian, what you said is that we're looking at it from the lens of what is going to bring in the most revenue for our district. I think
Yeah.
that's our number one goal,
With that focus.
I would say at least, and I see a lot of heads nodding, so I'm assuming that's right. And then within that scope, what are some options that we can do, keeping that our number one priority to support our neighbors? Is as simply as I feel like.
You're saying the number one priority is to support the neighbors?
No, to bring in the most revenue
Okay.
for our district is
204s,
number one.
yeah, priority.
And then secondarily,
Within the zoning.
within the zoning, secondarily, what can we do to help support our neighbors?
Based on all the things.
Based
that
on
they
all the requests.
share. Yeah.
With, again, number one priority is bringing in the most
I would
revenue for our
change that
district.
to support all of our neighbors.
Yeah.
Because everybody that, from the summaries, we got different, people had different needs. You know, what we've heard from where the park district might be okay with one thing, the city might be
Right.
okay with one thing, but the people living adjacent to the property may not be okay with that. So I think that needs to be clarified. It's all the neighbors, not just the neighbors, because that to me is the
I agree
bordering
with
of the
you.
property.
I agree with you. What I was referencing is the conversations that we've had with those 3 entities, or the groups within that area that I was talking about. But yes, I agree with you. I understand what you're saying.
So is it, if I can just restate this, is the first priority within zoning, the second priority is highest revenue, the third priority is supporting the community or supporting neighbors, but zero in on that.
Well, I'm struggling within the zoning, because if you have, right now how it's currently zoned would be more like estate properties, but if you were gonna do a higher density housing, that would not be within zoning. That's my understanding.
There's,
Yeah.
so, the zoning basically only allows schools there right now. Other than that, it's got recommendations related to large lot homes. Anything that's gonna go there is gonna have to get most likely a PUD from the city. So when we talk within zoning, it's basically those larger lot types of residences that the city seems to be okay with and how it's gonna be there. It's not a normal zoning like R1 and they have to get R1. Any development of this property is gonna have to go before the village and get approval on it.
So, that changes then the scope, because if we're gonna stay within zoning, then it's not.
No, it doesn't change, because we're looking at the property and the information we've gathered and how we can get that together and put the piece of property in light of those requests and our desires to put it on the street. The zoning component is, frankly, we're gonna put in the packet that it's the developer or the buyer's obligation to comply with the zoning that's there and to develop it in accordance with the rules and regulations from the village.
So that's not so if we can take that back out then, of anything that we would present would be within zoning, it would be up to the buyer to do that. So they could have higher density housing, different things like that.
Right, I think.
I guess I'm
with,
not
like-
certain what you're trying to get at, because
Because,
the
like-
zoning the zoning of the property doesn't allow residential development per se. In other words, you
Correct.
can't go in there right now and build houses. The village has to give that unless you build those.
Right, but if we keep saying that our number one goal is to keep it within zoning, then that maybe isn't our number one goal, because if that's what they're gonna work with.
Right. I think it's like still
I mean, it's-
premature because we don't have like a seller or a buyer. I think it's still
Well, I guess-
all premature because like
No.
these.
It's not, you're not gonna have a buyer. You have to go out and seek a buyer, right?
Right.
And you've got to decide what it is you're gonna present to a buyer to buy. And right now, we don't know that, unless you're not gonna just consider what everyone, the different bodies we've met with.
Right, so it's basically taking all of what they've heard and then just like going by deciding what we should go with based upon the feedback they've
Right, but
received.
then going back to what Tim's saying, his number one priority was to have it be within current zoning. Did I hear you?
No, I
Okay.
said highest value.
Highest
Highest
value.
value, number one, and then secondarily, what can we do to,
Somebody said then within current zoning.
I
It's
said
always,
that.
the discussions have
But
always
highest
been
value
around
also
zoning.
Within it, right?
does
Yeah.
not
Always.
mean like current zoning.
Well, that's why I think, that's where I'm struggling with, like, what is the scope within that? Because
We've
if-
been down that road.
Yeah, there's no, as far as I know, though, I thought there was no desire from this board to go down the zoning change route.
Well, I don't think going down it, but I think with the way it's currently zoned, anything's going to be a zoning change. So I think that, you know what I
Not
mean?
really, because they don't have it zoned to be strictly like you were saying, it's not just one of your typical primary zones. They kind of created their own zone.
Right, so they have to comply, but if that's,
But
Which
is your-
encompasses pretty much anything other than industrial, right? So I think what
I
Tim
don't-
is saying is,
I
let's
don't
get the
think-
biggest bang for the buck, but also, let's not go in and start looking at doing things like industrial zoning when we know that that's not what they wanted. Is that what, did I hear it correctly? That's how I heard it. Yeah.
So.
There's gonna be options.
We control, let me back up a little bit. We control the zoning while we own the property. In other words, we would have to seek a zoning change if we wanted it, while we own it, even if it's under contract. Okay? If the new buyer, let's say there was a new buyer and buys it, and they wanted to change it, then that would be up to them and the village to go through that process. There's nothing we can do on that. When we sell it, though, we can say, we're not going to entertain anything for this other than items within the zoning regulations that are there, and it must be residential while we're owners. So that we can try and minimize anything with regard to industrial use or whatnot. That's our ability to do that, and we would say that, because it seems that's what I thought was the broadcast, we're gonna stay within that zoning, which is more residential or mixed use.
but isn't it within residential, there's many different things, because I know we talked about like high-density housing from an estate lot. So who would make that decision? If we
Well,
put it out to
that's
bid?
all village decisions.
Right.
Right.
So I think maybe like the zoning is what is throwing me, that if we just go for high, it's the buyer that needs to decide the zoning, if what they want to build there is applicable.
Compliant, right. So, for example, let me go back a little. When Pulte gave you the unsolicited offer to purchase, they gave you based on two different zonings. One was a little bit more dense than the other. Neither one complied with what was suggested under the current zoning. They would have to work with the village to get those in place, get those into place. Again, as the owner, you are the one who have the right to file the application on their behalf with them to go down that route. And we can put that in terms and conditions that we will do, we will proceed that way, provided that it's a residential development with no industrial, no commercial, however we want to phrase that. Alternatively, we can sell the property and they don't go through a zoning due diligence, and then you've sold it to ABC Corporation who wants to do a residential, but maybe they want a higher density. Then at that juncture, when it's sold, it's between the village and that owner.
So we wouldn't be selling it with deed restrictions? Or maybe we would?
You can, when you sell, that's another thing that would impact the ability, the cost, the price. But you could do that. You could do that.
'Cause- I mean, okay, so,
Those zoning issues, frankly, I wasn't getting into on this first round of a committee.
Okay.
That's what I wasn't, those are a little bit more complicated. But yes, you're 100% correct. You can go down that route and go down other ways to limit it through deed restrictions and whatnot.
okay.
All right. So are we okay having a small group, people at this table that would digest all of this and come back so that we would have different scenarios, just like what you were just talking about, but then we can get into the weeds and have that conversation, so then it starts to formulate a path forward? I'm seeing nodding heads.
Yes.
I'm okay with it,
Nodding heads.
provided we don't have the goals that we're setting, because I feel like that is what's maybe making me apprehensive of the goals of the administrative
I
committee.
think that that's not.
That would be something
like,
we
I
would
feel like the
discuss.
committee's not making any decisions,
decisions.
right?
Oh, no,
That-
but that's what was
that
going
happens
into,
in the boardroom.
right, but within going into the committee, saying our number one goal is this, this, and this, I want it to be much more vague than that and have it come back to us, so that we as a board then look at those decisions that the committee has decided, and then we decide as a board at that point in time what would be the most important to us.
I just want to clarify, the committee is not going to make
I
any
understand.
decisions.
But, right, but
Yeah.
there was a lot of talk here about what is our number one goal, and I don't know that we need to have that. That's making me have apprehension tonight
I hear
about
what you're
that.
saying. I think, from a committee standpoint, and we should just look at those options, and then you as a board would
Yes.
decide, you know, what Tim said or Jill said, you know, this is, option 5 doesn't address what we as a board think is the number one important item, which is maximizing value.
But we haven't as a board discussed.
Correct,
what our
yes.
number- That's where I guess I'm having apprehension. Okay.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So I agree that those items can be fleshed out at a board meeting, board level, as after the committee kind of walks through this and you see what the options are and how they hit your various, you know, important points for each of you.
I would feel comfortable with that, provided that there was not goals for the committee. It was just a general seeking, like what you had written down, all information, look at, you know, the property and present to the board, not with goals in mind, or making the board decision here as to what is the number one goal.
All right. Anything else on that topic before we move on? Thank you, James.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too. You too. All right. So then, our next topic is the strategic plan, Goal 4 update. So Dr. Waterman.
Thank you. So this is our third strategic plan goal update of the year. We discussed Goal 3, which is our high-quality diverse staff, in October. And then we discussed Goal 1, which is our student performance and academic achievement, in November. And tonight, we're excited to share an update on Goal 4, which is our family and community partnerships. Before we get into Goal 4, I just want to kind of set some context and remind our board that really everything related to our strategic plan is on our website. We have the goals, the aligned strategies, the current year and all of our previous years' priority lists as well, our data targets, our progress reports, our scorecard, really everything that you need strategic plan related. And then I also want to just talk a little bit about how we arrive at developing the priority lists each year. This will be a reminder for a few of you and maybe new information for some others. But this process for the current school year starts in late April or early May of the previous school year. That's when our strategic plan action teams meet to review the progress of the current year. And they will look at the accomplishments from the year, but also look at, hey, what did we say we were going to start, or what did we say we were going to do that we haven't gotten to yet? That becomes our draft priority list for the following year, that obviously are aligned to our strategies and our goals. So that happens in late April, early May. And then those draft lists are analyzed and vetted through all of our leadership teams throughout May and early June. And then they come back to the board in late June as kind of like the final step in developing our priority list for the year. So we went through that exercise last spring. So the priority list I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about tonight was that seed was planted back in April, May, vetted through all our leadership teams and through the Board of Education in late June. Then fast forward to our very first action team meeting of the year in August. That's when our team set targets for the year based upon our scorecard. And then, of course, we get into October with our monthly goal update. So we take the opportunity October, November, December, January, February to take a deeper dive into each of the 5 goals. And then we'll do again in June, we kind of do a quick flyover of all 5 goals at one meeting. So that just kind of is a reminder about how we kind of our yearly flow of strategic plans. So tonight, I want to talk about Goal 4, and specifically just the overall goals and strategies. Again, Goal 4 is around partnering with families in our community to support and expand learning opportunities for all of our students. It has 3 strategies included within the goal. The first one is really just basic communication and transparency with our community, with our parents, our staff, our students, and our extended community who don't have students here or who aren't connected in any direct way to LTs. That's one of our strategies. Our second strategy is promoting high school readiness by fostering communication and collaboration with our associate districts. That's all of the articulation work that happens with our 6 feeder school districts, but also LADSI, our special ed cooperative as well. And then the third strategy is how do we partner with our community to expand students to career pathways and community services. That also falls within Goal 4 as well in those 3 strategies. So real quickly, I'm going to present here, hold on. So real quickly, our 24, 25 priority lists, I'm just going to do a quick flyover of these, and then we're going to take a deeper dive into 2 of the strategies. We have a team here to help us here. So within communications, on our priority list for this year is updating our mass communication system, mobile app, continuing to host all those community events that we host throughout the year. Our BPAC committee, our community collective, Sankofa, Building Inclusive Community event. Updating and communicating our social media guidelines, continuing to explore creative ways to communicate with our staff. We still use 5 Essentials survey to gather feedback from our community. We've continued to produce and distribute video content in the Excellence Innovation Empowerment Series, Student Spotlights, Strategic Planning Series as well. And then kind of a big goal the last couple of years has been connecting with our community who don't have direct connections here, and Mary Lynn's going to talk about that in a second. Increasing membership with our LTCAC has been a big movement over the last couple of years. And then also continuing to expand our translation services as well. So that's the quick view of priority list for communication. Within career pathways, it's displayed here, but this is something that we're not really going to go into deeply tonight because we're going to highlight the other 2 areas. But we've already approved officially ISB approved career pathways in entrepreneurship, computer programming, our education pathway, and then aviation, airline, commercial, professional pilot. We're adding this year radio broadcasting, apparel and textile, and engineering pathway as well. And then on the docket for next year will be our automotive mechanics and technician program as well. Then with our 3rd strategy, enhancing collaboration with our associate schools, we are going to take a deep dive into this 1-pager document that Dr. Tyrell is going to share here in a second that kind of talks about learner preparedness for high school and some really great work that our team's done with our associate schools there. We've continued to enhance all those transition events, so Future Freshman Night and the entire process from really the starts, this year was November 13th, and we'll go all the way through next August to get our newest Lions ready for LT. And then obviously just continue to enhance our articulation with our feeder schools as well. So that's the quick view of all the priorities that we're focusing on. But what we want to do tonight is take a deeper dive into strategy 1, which is that engagement and communication transparency with our community. And Mary Lynn Muscolino is here tonight to share an overview. And we also have Bridget Mekalinsky and Jim Pasco, who are integral in this overall work that we do to communicate with our community. So I'll let Mary Lynn take it away from there. And Bridget and Jen, welcome.
Good evening, everybody. I'm excited to share with you some of the work that we're doing in the Community Relations Department under Goal 4. As Dr. Waterman had mentioned, our main focus is on the strategy of building confidence and engagement with the community. We do this through improved communication, collaboration, and transparency. Tonight I'm going to share some highlights of how we do that across the board and some accomplishments that we've made it in this year so far. So starting with our district website, in the last 2 years we've made some significant changes and advancements, with the last round of improvements happening this summer. Those improvements were met with really positive feedback from our users and the folks that we talk to. Some of those highlights include feedback regarding the user's overall experience with our translation capabilities, with the ease of navigating through the pages to find the information that folks are looking for, as well as moving these search capabilities to the main page up at the top. A lot of folks have commented that they appreciate those changes, which is really exciting. We continue to utilize video as a main way of communicating messages, celebrations, and have added a special section to the front of the front of the website, the main page, that we're constantly updating that information, which is exciting, as well as the information that we put into the headlines section. We continue to have a strong flow of traffic to our website. We currently have 117,000 current users with 454,000 page views so far this academic year and counting. In addition to the website, we have some highlights as far as our social media presence. We're really focusing on strong content and consistency this year in our messaging. We currently have 6,800 Facebook followers, 1,600 X followers, and 5,700 Instagram followers. Our video content continues to be the highlight of our communication strategy, with many of the videos having high view rates on social media. In fact, one celebration video shared in October has been viewed by over 8,200 people and counting, which is exciting. With a strong emphasis continuing to be on the district accounts, something that we have been focusing on a lot this year is alumni, with the help of Jennifer Pasco. And so we've also increased our alumni page presence, creating new content to engage past students and encourage their participation within the community. Our email messages are a very, very exciting highlight of the work that we do. To put into context in the email world, the average open rates for emails in the education sector are approximately 39%. Across the board, our email messages are well above, they exceed the 65%, which is fantastic. Some specific highlights of that are Dr. Tyrell's weekly email averages a 77% open rate, which correlates to approximately 6,000 emails being opened a week. Exciting. Superintendent messages have an average open rate of 75%, which correlates to approximately 7,900 opens per message. Board briefs have an average open rate of 65%, which correlates to approximately 4,200 emails opened each month, which are pretty strong numbers, so we're excited about that. We continue to focus on engaging, as Dr. Waterman said, our community members who do not currently have students enrolled at LT. This year, we have expanded our printed media campaign to include some additional collateral pieces to reach the entire district, which is approximately 33,000 households. So by doing that, we have included in this campaign 3 individual postcards that are going out this year, a copy of our fine arts calendar, as well as our By the Numbers booklet. Those are being mailed to all 33,000 households, so that not only are they aware of what's going on a day-to-day basis here on campus, but also events and things that they can attend, public events, and information, across the board as far as, what we're doing with numbers and things as far as our progress and the strategic plan. So all of these mailed pieces have QR codes designed to encourage the community to visit our dedicated community website. That website was something that we started last year and we put a lot of work into really engaging the community with information about the LTCAC, encouraging signing up for e-news, learning more about opportunities where the community can participate, events happening on campus, like I mentioned, updates on groundwork for a brighter future in the construction that's happening at South Campus, and a constant overview of the progress of our 5-year strategic plan, and so much more. So we're excited to have that as a resource for the community. The community relations team is always looking for new and creative ways to showcase the accomplishments of our incredible students, faculty, and staff, and community. We created this past year Inside Look magazine at the end of the year, which really serves as a celebration of all of these accomplishments and all the things that really make LT such a special place. We had such a great time doing that we've decided that's going to be an annual magazine that we're going to put together, showcasing really all the things that happened during the year, to celebrate at the end all of us coming together and the exciting things that are happening here at LT. So on behalf of the community relations team, certainly we want to thank you for allowing us to share LT's story.
The print campaign, the department won several awards from INSPRA about 3 weeks ago at their state conference, and so I think it was 12 different submissions, with a little assist from Marilyn, who suggested that they actually submit them for. So
Absolutely.
really cool to
Maryland
get
recommended,
recognized.
and we did. We submitted in 14 categories and were awarded in 12, which was very exciting. So we're happy to do it.
An incredible job. So thank you so much. I would put your video storytelling up against anybody. It's really, really well done. And the emails in particular, that's really hard. Like, people get a lot of email fatigue, so it's really hard. And I think it just speaks to, you know, the schedule that you have implemented and your engaging and relevant content that people know that they don't want to miss it. So just kudos to the team. It's a lot of work coming out of your school.
Thank you. We love the work that we do, and we're excited to do it. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to share some of the highlights tonight.
I will send, so I think the board packet has this document on there, but the links aren't active, but I will share with you guys the version that has all the links active, so that way you can explore a lot more.
I'm really thrilled too that you guys have kind of resurrected some of those direct mail pieces. I know they're expensive and that's a commitment that we make, but there's just so many other people that don't always go where they think they can get that information. So finding multiple ways to reach these people is so critical. And I feel like I've seen such a shift and such a change that there's like a labor of love, like as you said, really enjoying what you're doing. And I go to the website all the time, and that probably is like an outdated thing because I know people use social media and all, other ways of connecting, but I still go to the website, and it has like gotten so strong and so robust, and I really appreciate all the work and effort that you guys have put into it. So, and I think my only other question might be like, are there any challenges or concerns or things that you think we should know, looking to the future that would help you be able to get some other things accomplished, or anything else that you think?
I think we're in a really good place. I think we have a roadmap to get us to where we want to go. We are actively working on one of the goals, which is a school-branded app. So that's something that we continue to push forward on, and hoping to see additional progress and have that launched by the end of this year, which is exciting. So I feel like we're in a really solid place, and providing updates to you on a regular basis as far as where we stand on things is really the goal. And we always appreciate your feedback if there are ideas as far as stories that can be told, videos and things. I would ask that you please feel free to reach out and share. We're happy to add that to the roster. But we've got a pretty full roster through the end of this year of content and things to share. So I think we're in a good place.
Thank you. Awesome. Good stuff.
The only question I had,
Yes.
what's the click rate? I saw the increase in percentage, so like.
For the emails?
Yes.
So let's see.
Because we have a lot, I looked at it from last year to this year, and our social media followers has increased significantly, so that's a big testament to the work that you guys are doing, that people are getting on there. I just didn't understand the 1.47 click rate for the superintendent's communication.
So basically, that means if there are links within the communication, people are clicking on those links. So you can see under email, the click rate for Dr. Tyrell's messages is roughly 10.25% on specific links.
That makes sense.
And then if we took an example from social media engagement on Facebook as far as content interactions, that would include click rates. On average, 12,600 content interactions through 902 links.
Okay. Yeah, and that, again, that's a huge
They're great
number. And a
numbers.
huge increase from last year.
Mhm.
So again, that's just a huge testament that people are looking to find the content that we're putting out. that you
People are
guys are-
definitely looking, they're using the resources, which is great. I think the consistency of the messages that we're putting out, the community is looking daily to see what we're posting. And we're being very mindful of the content that we're putting out to make sure that we are sharing the celebrations, that we are sharing the information that the community wants to know about. And we're seeing that in the analytics and the metrics, because people are jumping on and they're clicking through and they're actually spending time on the website, on different pages and things, which is all good signs that we're headed in the right direction.
Very good, thank you.
I just had a quick follow-up to that as well. First of all, huge fan. I really appreciate, like Carrie was saying, that the direct mail pieces. What a nice surprise to see such high-quality, bold color pieces come through the mail. So thank you for that. It's fantastic. The click rates and data that you're capturing, I'm wondering if the increase is coming from continued community areas and/or are you able to look at it by different subgroups, if you will,
Yes.
like Summit and Bridgeview, and are we getting new communities more engaged, or is it kind of in the same geography?
I
where
would
we see
say
an
that the
increase?
majority of the traffic comes from the familiar areas. That surprisingly includes downtown Chicago as well as our district area. But we are starting to see numbers in communities outside of our district who are logging on and checking out information. We see that a lot in sports, obviously that's a consistent thing. But as far as headlines and different topics on the website, we're definitely able to see that other communities are interested in what's happening here. And then also targeting, I don't know, Bridget, the main traffic comes from Western Springs, Chicago,
Yes.
and
We talked
LaGrange,
about perhaps that's a parent
Highlands.
that's downtown at work
Mhm.
and checking their email, or checking the website or something along those lines. LaGrange, yes, we all of the area around here.
But we do, we keep an eye on that because we rely very heavily on the metrics and the analytics because that helps us understand what the community is looking for, what the community is interested in, and also what we need to retarget. And we need to share possibly again, if we didn't get the response that we were hoping for, but we want to make sure that that community engagement is there. So we rely very heavily, our strategy is based on what the analytics look like.
That's great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you again,
Great job.
Bridget and Jen, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
So our next highlight is, this is related to our articulation with our feeder schools. This has been a 2-year project in the making that Dr. Tyrell and Sarah Smith and our division chairs have worked diligently on, as well as a bunch of teachers and really all of our freshman teachers, really to identify what are the skills that make a student high school ready. What are they, what skills do students need to become high school ready? And this is information that we share with our feeder schools, so I'll let Dr. Tyrell kind of talk about the project, you guys saw this last year as well, but there's been a layer added onto it this year, so.
Yeah, thanks,
away.
Dr. Waterman. Before I jump into the high school preparedness document, Dr. Waterman shared the 3 strategies that are included within Goal 4. And I just want to point out that there's interconnectedness, bless you, between those 3 strategies. So we work closely, Greg Gardner, Drew Eater, myself, we really work to lead the transition process and the articulation process. We work very closely with the Community Relations Department to produce the incoming student website. This year we put together a transition guide. They helped develop the preparedness document. Last year, in very short order, they helped produce a series of elective videos that really enhance the transition process. So there's 3 strategies, but really they're all interconnected, and just wanted to highlight some of those areas as well.
Real quickly too, the document that Jen's talking about is in front of you. You guys have a hard copy, so just want to make sure you have that.
And we laugh about this document because it started out, we call it the 1-pager, and it is now 3 pages. And probably the next time we present, it'll be even more. But just to recap, last year when we shared our Goal 4 update, we had finalized the academic concept section of the 9th grade preparedness document. And I want to share just a brief update on how this document, the academic concept portion of the document, is being used to drive articulation meeting discussions that our DCs are facilitating with 9th grade teachers and associate school teachers. So we had always envisioned that this document would serve as a foundation and a grounding tool for those articulation conversations, and those are happening now. Most of our groups meet 3 times a year, so most of them have only met 1 time. A couple of them have yet to meet. But what they're doing with the document, within each content area, they're identifying the most essential concepts to start with, and they're really digging into those concepts. So they're talking about to what extent, they're asking the question, to what extent do students need to do the skill to be ready, right? So it's one thing to have the skill or the concept identified, but really digging in and talking about to the extent to which students need to be engaged with that concept to be ready is a higher level, higher level discussion. They're also talking about evidence that demonstrates that particular skill at the readiness or preparedness level. So it's really cool to see the evolution of the document being created, kind of this idea that it would be used at those articulation meeting conversations. The division chair group determining kind of the process that they would follow across all departments, and then it to live at the articulation table, and teachers, 9th grade with junior high, with associate school teachers, digging in and talking about those actual concepts. And just one example, within the English section, one of the essential content listed is articulate and apply where the main idea and theme is in a passage. So just to give one practical example. So when they ask that first question about the extent to which they need to do the skill, the team determined that students would need to articulate the main idea and or theme, but they also had additional discussions about text complexity. So as they're digging in and talking about each of the concepts, it's bringing about more conversations for them to have as a group. Additionally, when they talked about evidence, they talked about, seeing students write a theme statement that really goes beyond topic. So just one tangible example, and I could share them from every content area. So they're going to continue that work throughout the course of this year. We are considering options for using this document as part of the placement process in the future. That was always something that we had in mind. We haven't quite identified the exact route to doing that, but we envision that in time, articulation committees will consider how each of these concepts might look different for those entering at the AP or honors level, and how they might look different for students who might need a little extra support and assistance as they transition into high school. And then that opens the door for those support opportunities that we talk about and that we develop and that we look at adding into our full scope of interventions. So that's kind of just an update on the portion of the document that you saw for the first time last year. We recently finished page 3 of the 1-pager, which is the learner behavior section. And this is really exciting work. So our work with identifying the learner behaviors aligned to ninth grade preparedness intersects with our efforts to operationalize our LT District 204 portrait of a graduate. We've talked for some time, right? We adopted our strategic plan. We have a portrait. We don't just want to have a portrait. We want to operationalize that portrait. And we still need to be transparent. We still need to have conversations about how we're going to use this document and the descriptors and the I can statements that are included. But it's really excited that we have a tool now that operationalizes the portrait. The feedback, so we got a lot of feedback along the way, and we started with our ninth grade teachers when we were getting feedback on the academic concepts. We got feedback on academic concepts and learner behaviors, and really quickly we realized we need to take a time out on the learner behaviors because we wanted to dig in more aligned to the portrait of a graduate. So that feedback and subsequent student and teacher feedback led to the development of early high school descriptors and I can statements within each of the competency areas, right? I think we all feel comfortable, I'm sure, with the fact that some of these competencies, all of these competencies, will look different at the 9th and 10th grade level than they will when students are leaving us. So the committee that ended up really sitting down and writing the descriptors felt very strongly that we needed to differentiate between early high school descriptors and actual descriptors of an LT graduate. And the early high school descriptors are communicated within this freshman preparedness document. So just to kind of summarize the large amount of feedback and the continuous feedback loop that we implemented in order to get to this document. So ninth grade teachers shared initial feedback. My advisory students, our principal student advisory committee, offered feedback. Draft descriptors were written. It went back to the principal student advisory committee, and then a teacher group worked for the better part of second semester last year to refine the descriptors and then write really general I can statements. After we had a solid draft, we brought it to our associate school principals. They reviewed it and offered feedback as well, and we tweaked some of those descriptors and I can statements. And then all of our administrative teams reviewed the document as well and provided feedback, offered suggestions for revision, and then we ended up with this document. So at this point in time, our next step is to share, Dr. Waterman will be sharing this document with our superintendents, associate school superintendents, and then we'll be sharing it with the principals. And to be honest, I anticipate that the principals are going to spend a significant amount of time. Almost all of our associate schools have portraits of a graduate. And when you look at their competencies, many of them align to the competencies that are included within our portrait. So I would suspect that when our principals at our associate schools kind of dig into the document, that they will work with teams to look at the alignment between our competencies, their competencies, and then what we're saying kind of students should be able to do. And again, similar to the academic concepts, we are in no way saying that every kid entering high school can do all of these things, right? We want them to live in and out of these things and to be able to, within their first couple of years of high school, be able to do some of these things or majority of the things that are outlined on this document. But we can't say that we want everyone to be hitting this target as soon as they transition into high school. But I think it offers a really nice framework for preparedness to high school, but then also kind of pursuits that students are on their first couple of years in high school. We'll share with the superintendents, we'll share with the principals, and then our next step after that, and we'll engage them in discussion about this, is thinking about how we can share this with our staff and how we operationalize it into the classroom, and then thinking about how we use this tool with our parents in the community as well. So happy about the progress, but know that, we have a long way to go in actually using this really robust document. And I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Wow.
So our feeder schools they received the first 2 pages of the 1-pager
Yeah,
last
I
year.
love that.
And now they'll receive the 3rd page,
Yeah.
which is the learner behavior competencies. So.
And really, we don't, what would we compare this to what we did prior to this? Like, we never had anything.
I mean, what I've always said is we would typically do articulation meetings where we would identify, let's say, in the department, math department, we'd have a couple teachers that would be meeting with 8th grade teachers. And there was not really a formal process. It would just be articulation discussions around what those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 teachers felt like was really important for an 8th grader coming into math, whether it be the skills and content or the learner dispositions. This is much more systematized to where the team got feedback from all of our current teachers to develop this, so. I think it just takes it to a
And I'm
really
sure
cool
very
level.
beneficial then to the feeder schools to see this and find this to be consistent, because I think this feels like, hopefully it feels a lot more like, you've identified what that roadmap looks like, and you've taken a lot of the guesswork out of it and a lot of subjectivity too out of it by being a lot more concrete, direct.
Yeah, to a principal, they were excited about the impact at the curriculum writing table and the impact that it can have, not just really in junior high, but even before. And really, they're probably even more interested in the learner behaviors, right? Because we're talking about the dispositions that students really need to have to be successful and be prepared. And so I think that they're even more interested about that, but they were excited for the impact on their curriculum review, their curriculum writing, and the guaranteed experiences that they have for their students across content areas. It's really exciting.
Jen used the word alignment earlier, and I think that's a really important word, because from a feeder school perspective, the programming that they develop, they can align it with these skills content, with these learner dispositions as well, to make sure they're covering as much of these dispositions as they can.
What's been the feedback so far in terms of what the gap is between our feeder schools and just the academic guide that you have so far?
It's a good question. I don't know if there's anything that I can specifically point my finger on. If we look at each of the departmental documents, we'd probably be able to identify some academic concepts, but nothing comes to mind right off the top of my head. I would have to do a little bit of analysis across department area, across our content areas to be able to answer that. Our DCs would know, right, like what concepts and what topics they're spending time really digging into and thinking about kind of how we can close the gaps that might exist.
Yeah.
One of my, so I love this learner behaviors document. I think it's phenomenal. Do you guys know if the feeder schools also use Panorama?
I think some of them do.
Some.
Where do they have?
I've not heard of that. Oh, I think I have.
It would be interesting if they did, and we were able to get their, because those results, you can see them year after year after year, right? To be able to see where, again, to the point of gaps or struggle areas, places where we could maybe identify supports for kids upon entering, but I just didn't know if those feeder schools are using it. Doesn't sound like it.
Scott seems to think, no,
I didn't think they did. It's not, I feel like I've had conversations with some associate schools that they do use, but I could be mixing that up with other high schools that I speak with. We can certainly find out. I think if we want to share that information, though, we would just need to get the proper permissions in order for them to be able to share like the direct data with us so that we could follow profiles and identify. I think they could only give that to us in aggregate right now, which wouldn't be as helpful, but.
Yeah. This is excellent.
You can ask that question. I mean, with our superintendents pretty regularly, so.
And
Thank you so
do we plan to continue to use this, evolve this? I mean, is this
One
and then
pager?
will
Yeah.
we be checking I guess what what the outcomes have been based on this? Do we think that there's gonna be some kind of shift? Possibly? I mean, is there a way to, I don't know how I'm measuring it necessarily, but.
I think we anticipate continuing to use this to guide articulation conversations, right? So like talking about all of the academic concepts and skills that are listed, right? I think our associate schools will continue to use it to guide their curriculum processes. But we also want to talk legitimately about placement and how this might inform placement decisions that are made, right? And what I love about it is, right, we have behaviors and we have the academic concepts, and we want placement decisions really to be made based on where students are at from an academic perspective. We don't want to make placement decisions based on other things that we should be supporting students in other areas. I could also question about gaps, right? I could see this document really being used to identify additional interventions and supports that we want to provide for our incoming students from an academic perspective, social emotional perspective. So I think there's a lot of potential outcomes, and I think that there's a lot of ways that we might be able to use this document in the future, and I think we've just like scratched the surface in developing it and starting those conversations with our associate schools. So there's a lot more to come in the future.
So it might become like a manual instead of a.
Yeah, we're gonna be at 6 pages before, so. Yeah, and we're, at some point, we'll post it on our website. We have Spanish translated document as well. We'll figure out a way to get it on the website so it can be translated in any language. But we want to figure out kind of the notes that we want to share with families in the community before we post it up there. We don't want people just engaging with it to engage with it. Like what is the benefit? What can they do with it? How can this guide conversations at home? How can this guide, conversations about courses that students are going to take? So we want to think strategically about that before people are engaging with it.
Right. So I think that this is good, and I think I mentioned that last year, but I still have a concern, because I think that we haven't addressed this, or you say you've addressed it with the associate schools, but there's a concern where I think there should be some kind of footnote that in order to be successful in math, like you should have taken algebra by 8th grade, which is not in here.
Yeah, I mean, Scott, that's the data you worked on with curriculum directors. I don't know that that's what we determined, was that you needed to be successful.
Well, but that was in the strategic plan with Perry.
Oh, you mean part of the original discussion?
No, part of the
like what he
look
presented?
of success of what a student should
Yeah, I
have.
think, Scott, what did we determined through our data that a student in freshman year, you worked on this last
Right.
But he
spring.
also said that himself.
Yeah, I mean, what we're finding is that students who haven't completed algebra by freshman year have a very low percentage of meeting standards. Problem is, it doesn't mean just by giving them algebra at 8th grade, they're gonna meet standards.
No, I know,
Right,
but
so
like-
we've had a lot of discussion about math and how's the best way to articulate mathematical proficiency, because to pretend that they're not trying to get kids there is also not true. They're working very hard to get kids up to speed in math as well. So, I think what we've kind of said all along with this type of a document, there are already state standards. There are already requirements of different curricula and whatnot. This is about those learner behaviors and the things that show a complete, ready student. I think everybody's trying to make sure everyone walks in the door able to do everything at grade level. It just isn't happening anywhere in the nation. So, at that 100%. So, that's really where this has been. We've kind of been very clear from the start that if this is a barrier to entrance, then it's the wrong path. This is more, these are the things that would be great and that we know we're kind of expecting and that we're using to do some placement. But if we start using those things as a placement barrier, we're going to be moving kids into lower level courses, and we're not going to be seeing the growth that we've seen in AP and dual credit and the things we've already seen. So there is sort of a fine line with what this group is doing in encouraging and sort of answering the question of, well, what does high school expect, as opposed to, if you don't make it in algebra, you're not going to make it in high school, and that's not the message.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's at the end of the day, it's a tremendous work in progress. We all have the same goal, right? The feeder schools, we do. It's just a matter of continuing to work on achieving that. Any other questions on the learner preparedness document? So that was a
Great work.
quick overview of Goal 4.
Thank you.
And again, all the stuff that we presented is on the website. You can look at previous priority lists, this year's priority list, the metrics, the targets, and all that.
I just had, not about the learner profile, but about something, I know you said we weren't going to spend a lot of time on that, but you did mention the pathways, that there's going to be 4 additional pathways that you're looking to get approved this year.
Yep.
Do we anticipate those 4 will get approved, and when do we find out about that?
We always anticipate things will get approved. not due until the 15th of December. We're looking to get that all inputted now. Last year, it took 2 to 3 months to get everything reviewed, rejected, fixed, and resubmitted. And then they changed all the rules again, and we have to resubmit everything even from last year. So we fully expect it to be approved. We have all the pieces in place. We just have to make sure we're demonstrating that the team-based challenges meet the letter and the spirit of the law. They've added many more layers to the proposal that we've been working toward, and it's been slow. I think it's been slow for everybody, and frankly a little frustrating. But we're getting there, and piece by piece. I'm working with our consultants at TCD, and making sure the dual credit agreements are in place, and making sure we've got all of the components that go into it prior to a kid even signing up for one course. And then they still have to sign up for that sequence of courses. So it's, although the state goal is for everyone to have one this year, so we are at least ahead of the game in that sense. And just looking at the different things we can do. Some things are pretty easy to create a pathway. Some things require, for example, an entire gut rehab of our kitchens and making them commercial kitchens instead of, so at one point we had the culinary on there.
Big one, culinary.
But that won't make it because we can't get the dual
We don't have
credit unless we
facilities
have
for it.
commercial kitchens.
Got it.
That's not in the budget, so.
Right. Like that would be a big obstacle to having a career pathways. We just don't have the culinary facilities. So that's a whole other facility discussion that
Yeah,
we need to continue to have
okay,
as we have been.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, the final item is human resources and the stipend committee recommendations. Ed?
Thank you, President Gretsch. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share the stipend committee recommendations tonight. We do have 4 proposals that can be found on page 23 of the board materials. 2 of these proposals involve the addition of new staff positions to expand capacity and reach of existing clubs, while the other 2 focus on creating stipends to formally establish new clubs within the LTHS activity club structure. These recommendations reflect our commitment to supporting the growth and engagement of our students through meaningful co-curricular opportunities. The first 2 stipend recommendations, which reflect growth and new positions, are Lyons Den and Sideline Cheer. We are recommending the addition of an additional stipend for a Lyons Den sponsor. For those who aren't aware, Lyons Den is effectively our student section who appropriately dress in blue and gold for all of our events and are at many of our athletic events as well as other school functions. We've had conversations with our current Lyons Den sponsor about his desire and the club's desire to expand even more into different events, go beyond the traditional basketball and football that they've been at, but multiple levels, boys sports, girls sports throughout all 3 seasons. And in order to do that, we would have a student supervision concern, and we would also be able to increase the number of students participating. And in order to do that, we would need to have an additional club sponsor. The current club sponsor receives a 2.64% stipend. The stipend committee met, and they are recommending the creation of a second club sponsor at 2.64, which would allow us to have additional supervision and enable the Lyons Den to expand its presence to more athletic events, including away games if possible. We also have a recommendation to create an additional assistant coach stipend for Sideline Cheer. Sideline Cheer participates in the fall and winter sports, and our JV and varsity cheerleaders play a critical role in building school pride at those events. They support both home and away games, Special Olympics events, and they perform halftime routines at assemblies, including our all-school assembly. Much like with Lyons Den, there has been a request from Sideline Cheer to increase capacity by adding an additional sideline cheer coach for the winter season that would allow them to participate at additional sporting events throughout the winter season, multiple levels and new sporting events. This will provide essential support for practices and events, ensuring the safety and success of the students who are in that program. This is a 15% assistant coach stipend given the nature of sideline cheer, the frequency of practices, the number of events that they support. And then looking ahead, we anticipate coming to the board in the spring with a proposal to further expand this into the fall as well. So we would just be making that recommendation for additional support for winter season at this time. We're going to revisit that, look at the success of that in the spring, but we do fully anticipate that given the success that we anticipate having with that additional coach, should it be approved, we would make that recommendation to balance out with an additional coach in the fall. And then finally, we have 2 recommendations for the formal creation of club stipends for 2 new clubs, actually 1 new club and 1 somewhat existing club at Lyons Township High School. The first is Sober Mesa. Sober Mesa is a Spanish language and cultural club that brings students together to practice Spanish, share meals, and build meaningful connections. This club is centered on fostering inclusivity and cultural understanding in a welcoming environment. It's different from the Spanish club, which is focused primarily on Spanish culture. This club focuses on Spanish culture, but with the primary focus being on the Spanish language itself, but doing that through Spanish culture. The approval of this club with a 2.64% sponsor stipend is recommended to support this growing club and ensure that it continues to provide those valuable opportunities for students. And then finally, Future Farmers of America. While we have had this club in the past, it has been grant funded, and that grant funding is no longer available, but we still have sustained student interest in participating in Future Farmers of America. This club combines leadership development with hands-on learning in agriculture, preparing students for careers in fields like science, business, and education. And as I stated, this was previously funded by grants, but those grants are no longer available. We do know that this club has consistent student interest and impact, and we are making the recommendation for a 2.64% stipend for this club, which would allow us to hire a formal sponsor and establish it as a formal LTHS co-curricular club. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
These are great clubs, but I do just have some curiosity questions about like the Lions Den.
Mhm.
Do they meet outside of the activities in preparation for the activities?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, how many students are we talking about?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can certainly get that information. Do you know?
Some of their meetings this year have been up to like over 100 students. So they meet in the study hall room at South Campus, and the room's almost too small for them. They've really grown over the last couple of years.
And they have student leaders as part of it that assist the club sponsor. But it has certainly grown tremendously, and there has been a desire to grow in terms of the sports and the activities that they support.
With the idea that they would be able to attend other,
Correct.
like, almost annuals to kind of
Correct.
and create more school spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Which is awesome. And then, all of these groups, they go throughout all the grade levels, right?
Mhm.
We have students at all different
That is correct.
ages.
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
And they're all, as far as the clubs go, they're all open to everyone. It's only when we're in athletics that you would have, limited participation or cut sports or no cut sports, but the clubs are all open to all students.
And then remind me again, you said one of the clubs, maybe it was sideline cheer, you said would be able to possibly do away games.
That's correct.
So how, do they currently do that?
Well, no, sideline cheer already does that at a limited capacity with some away games. What the expansion into away games would be more for Lyons Den, where they might have students that would meet over at that and then have a club sponsor that would be able to be at those away games with them. Yeah.
So they wouldn't travel with like.
We don't anticipate that they would be traveling with the team. As part of this recommendation, there weren't any requests for like transportation costs or anything. That certainly could be something down the road, but at this point, there hasn't been that. It was just, we do know we have students that do participate or do attend away games, so this would be kind of just like a formal structuring
And
of
to be
it.
sure that there's a supervisor
Correct.
there. Okay,
Correct.
that makes sense. I like that. Okay, great.
Do we have, do you know numbers for the other groups though, the Future Farmers and?
I can certainly pull those numbers up.
And then while you're looking that up, do we know, are there ever times where stipends are removed because of the lack of interest, and do we ever hear about those?
We do. We go through that process on a yearly basis. So clubs can be removed for a variety of reasons. Generally, they will be removed if they were in a pilot status and they never really took hold. So, but at that point, there wouldn't have been a stipend associated with it. They don't receive a stipend until they're after clubs, until they receive that formal status. After they receive that formal status, if there's a lack of a sponsor or if there is no longer student interest, those clubs usually go dormant first before we remove them entirely. It's not uncommon, and Joe, you can certainly speak to this from being on the stipend committee yourself, and Paula now with you, that we will see similar proposals come up every so often. So it's not uncommon if we have a club that used to exist that now comes back into play. We might have a club that becomes dormant, and then we just essentially bring that back to life in terms of that club. So if we don't have a need to pay a sponsor for it or student interest, that club just goes unpaid. So,
Ed, you will appreciate, over the break, there was a robust debate in my house among LT students about whether card games would be appropriate for the board game club and how that process is, and if there's enough overlap or if they're separate. Lots of debate over it.
So I'm looking at the, and I agree, I think card games should be part of it. We have similar conversations in my house.
I said good luck getting through the stipend committee, but go ahead and write a proposal.
I'm looking at the Sober Mesa roster, Tim, and there were 27 students on that with 10 student leaders on that one. And let me check Future Farmers Association.
Cool.
So Future Farmers was a smaller group. This has 9 students that are part of it. This was originally part of work that we had established through grants, which was Future Farmers and then Manners, which was, Scott, do you remember the acronym for Manners, what that was?
No, I just know that she had to journal everything for the grant, so we had 28 kids do community service activities, 6 people do competitions, 3 work on equipment maintenance, 16 do some adult ed programs, 20 do school farm livestock greenhouse care, 9 with regional, state, and national service activities, 12 with some national competition practice, and then with all the kids involved in the class itself, they've had as many as 225 do things. Yeah. So it's, but the club and the class are kind of merged. But the class has lower enrollment this year, so that was part of the reason why the grant doesn't exist.
But it is something that we would like to keep going, and given that the small amount of that stipend, that is essentially the base level stipend.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you, Scott.
That'll come back in a couple weeks.
Yes, that would be on the consent agenda.
I do have a question, though.
Go ahead.
What do you, okay, when I'm looking at the Future Farmers of America, it says it's an intracurricular club. What does that mean in comparison to like an extracurricular activity?
Sure, that is just referencing that it's not strictly talking about agriculture. It does have things that are related to, business, science, education. It is talking about different curricular areas within, yeah.
Okay.
That term extracurricular, co-curricular, in this case intracurricular, they're not in that same universe of general terms, but it's talking about the different types of curriculum that they talk about.
Okay, gotcha. I just didn't know if it was part of like during the day, because when I.
No, these are all outside of the school day.
Okay. I can, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. Appreciate it. Okay, and with that, we move to public participation, but I think we are good. So then that concludes all our business this evening. So at this time, the board will move into closed session for litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting, 5 ALCS 120/2C11. Can we have a motion to move into closed session, please?
Second.
Marilyn, would you please call the roll?
Member Peter Daniels. Yes.
Member Dillon.
Yes.
Member Giannotti Fry.
Yes.
Member Struing.
Yes.
Member Thomas.
Yes.
Member Alvarez.
Yes.
Member Gretsch.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.